Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Near the end of the initial portion of John Searle's Minds, Brains, and Programs, where he is presenting his position, which introduces the Chinese room thought experiment and engages with a number of different positions, he's going to grapple with a really important question. So if the claims of strong AI proponents are really not supportable, why is it that so many people, including a lot of cognitive scientists, believe that there is such a thing as AI? Why do they believe or think that machines can think or understand or have other intentional states? And Searle is going to say, there are several reasons why AI must have seemed, and to many people perhaps still does seem, and I think in our present day these apply quite a bit as well, to in some way reproduce and thereby explain mental phenomena. And he says, I don't think we'll succeed in removing these illusions until we fully expose the reasons that give rise to them. And he's going to identify three main reasons. And these are pretty applicable to the present as they were back in his time. So they have to do not just with AI in a general sense, but with different models that are available and the ways in which people look at them. So the first thing that he says is that there's a confusion about the very notion of information processing. He says many people in cognitive science believe that the human brain with its mind does something that they call information processing, and analogously, the computer with its program also does information processing, but fires and rainstorms, or we could say other things like perhaps thermostats, don't actually do information processing. So human minds definitely do information processing. Computer programs analogously do information processing. Other things that are complex systems that produce effects don't do information processing. And so he's going to say, so even though the computer can simulate the formal features of any process whatsoever, it's in a special relation to the mind and brain. Why? Because when the computer is programmed in the right way, ideally with the same program as the brain, the information processing is going to be identical in both cases. So it's not just analogous, it's actually the same thing. And this is where the really strong claim comes in. Information processing is really the essence of the mental. And, we could reformulate this in the very popular claim, your brain is just like a big computer. All it's doing is information processing. So when we have these digital computers over here, they're really the same kind of thing and do the same sorts of activities and produce the same sorts of things that your brains do. Searle is going to say, hold on a second here. There's a real ambiguity in this notion of information. So we know that human beings do, in fact, process information. For example, when they reflect on problems in arithmetic or they read and answer questions about stories, human beings do information processing. Do computers actually process information? No. They manipulate formal symbols in very, very complex, sort of arrays and with complex rules. Yes, but merely manipulating formal symbols from an input to an output is not the same thing as information processing, unless you're really loose and sloppy with what processing is supposed to mean. He says that the fact that the programmer and the interpreter of the computer output use the symbols to stand for objects in the world is totally beyond the scope of the computer. So if you type into the computer 2 + 2 = ? It will type out 4, but it has no idea that 4 means 4 or that it means anything at all. And so that's an issue right there. And he addresses a rebuttal. What if we just say, well, it lacks some second-order information about the interpretation of its first-order symbols? And he says, well, that doesn't get you out of the problem because it doesn't have any interpretation of the first-order symbols, period. It doesn't know what these actually are. All the computer has is mere symbols. And as we saw earlier, they're not even symbols for it, the way symbols are for a human being that symbolize something. So he says that introducing this notion of information processing produces a dilemma. Either we construe the notion of information processing in such a way as it implies intentionality as part of the process, or we don't. Now, if we take the first, well, as we've seen, program computers, no intentionality. So they don't process information. If we take out the notion of intentionality from the notion of information processing, then sure, digital computers process information, but they don't do it in the way that human beings actually do. And if we're going to call what they do information processing, well, then we've got to say that adding machines, typewriters, stomachs, thermostats, rainstorms, and hurricanes do information processing. What does that mean? They have a level of description where we can describe them as taking information in at one end, inputs, transforming it, program, and then producing information as outputs. So either horn of the dilemma is going to be a problem there, right? So that's one good rebuttal. Second, he talks about a residual behaviorism or operationalism. Now, if you're not familiar with this term, behaviorism, it is an idea that originally emerges from psychology and makes its way into cognitive science and the philosophy of mind. And the general idea is that how do we know that human beings are conscious? Well, we can't really know. All we can do is observe their behavior. We can look at inputs. We can look at outputs. We don't really know what's happening inside. And so, it could just be a formal process like a computer, right? Or it could just be random things happening, but we don't care. All we're really interested in doing when we attribute intentionality to human beings or intentional states is talking about the input and the output. What kind of behavior is generated from what sort of environment or stimulus or whatever we're going to call it, right? So he says that appropriately programmed computers can have input-output patterns similar to those of human beings, right? Think about a chatbot, for example. So we're tempted to postulate mental states in the computer similar to human mental states. But once we see that it's possible, and this is the entire point of the Chinese room thought experiment, once we see that it's possible for a system to do this without any actual intentionality, then we can escape this mistake, right? Overcome this impulse. So he says, my desk adding machine has calculating capacities. Just think about your, calculator, but no intentionality. And I've shown in this paper that a system could have input and output capabilities that duplicated those of a native Chinese speaker, but still not understand Chinese. And so here he talks about the Turing test, and this, of course, goes back to Alan Turing's imitation game where you're not actually saying that the digital computer thinks. All you're doing is saying that it can fool human beings into thinking it's a human being a certain percentage of the time. As a matter of fact, Turing said we can replace the question whether a computer thinks by this particular test, right? A pragmatic test. And he says that the Turing test is typical of, now notice the word that he uses here, the tradition. There's already a long established tradition of being unashamedly behavioristic and operationalistic, right? So there's an AI tradition going on which is perfectly happy to use Turing tests, even though they don't tell us anything about actual consciousness, intentionality, thought, any of those sorts of things, right? Then third, piggybacking off of that, he says this residual operationalism or behaviorism is joined to a residual form of dualism. So dualism is usually understood, at least in philosophy of mind, as in saying, look, you've got bodies and then you have minds, and they're different kinds of things. They might map onto each other in interesting ways, but they're not the same, right? So Searle actually doesn't like this. He wants to reject dualism, and he accuses AI proponents of being officially against dualism, but actually smuggling in a certain kind of dualism. So basically, their complaints about dualism are a smokescreen for what they're doing. So he says that, listen, in strong AI and in functionalism, what matters are programs, and programs are independent of their realization in machines. And as far as this goes, the same program could be realized in a number of different, as we often call them today, substrates. It could be a digital machine. It could be a Cartesian thinking substance, or Descartes' mind as opposed to body. Even Hegelian world spirit. And you could pick any other sort of thing that you like. It's supposed to be independent. This is why people think, well, I could upload my consciousness into the cloud because it doesn't really matter, whether it's in brain cells or computer circuitry and programs. It's all basically the same thing, isn't it? And Searle says, well, that's a form of dualism. Dualism between the program and the medium that the program is in. And he says that, this is characteristic of strong AI. Unless you believe that the mind is separable from the brain, both conceptually and empirically, dualism in a strong form, you cannot hope to reproduce the mental by writing and running programs, because programs must be independent of brains or any other kind of form of instantiation, right? If mental operations consist in computational operations on formal symbols, then they have no interesting connection with the brain. And then you could do all the AI stuff that you want with your computers. You don't need brains anymore, except maybe as a model to use for a while. So, he is going to say that this is actually a form of Cartesianism. Not in the sense of saying there's two different kinds of substances, but he says it's Cartesian in that it insists that what is specifically mental about the mind has no intrinsic connection with the actual properties of the brain. And Searle actually wants to say, in fact, it does. We are machines. Our brains are machines. They're a different kind of machine than a digital computer, and they generate, however they do so, intentionality, thought, consciousness, perception, all of those sorts of things. And so he says, could a machine think? My view is that only a machine can think, and only special kinds of machines, namely brains and machines that have the same causal powers as brains. And he says, whatever intentionality is, it's a biological phenomenon. And it's likely to be as causally dependent on the specific biochemistry of its origins as lactation is, or photosynthesis, or any other biological phenomenon. He's going to bring in a really interesting analogy here. He says, would you think that we could produce milk and sugar by running a computer simulation of the formal sequences in lactation or photosynthesis? No, you'd say that's just a computer-generated model, but it ain't the real thing, right? So why then do you think that's the case for mind or intentionality? Well, he says, because of a deep and abiding dualism. The mind, they suppose, is a matter of formal processes and independent of quite specific material causes in ways that milk, generated from lactation, and sugar, generated from photosynthesis, is not. So Searle is saying, listen, if you can get rid of these three errors, you're not going to be suckered in to thinking that AI is able to do the same things as human beings when it comes to intentional states or activities like understanding, thinking, being conscious of itself, all of those other sorts of things. Now, many people do, in fact, not just think, but make big bombastic claims that AI is doing this, AI is doing that. Here's Searle's response to those sorts of what he would take to be delusions about whether AI is, in fact, genuinely intelligent.